How's it going, everyone? This is John at the Drone Life, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about using drones for land surveys. So what you're going to be learning is what are drone land surveys, what are some of the traditional methods of land surveying, what are the benefits of using drones for the surveys, what types of mapping data can the drone achieve, and how accurate are drone land surveys, as well as what are some required qualifications that you need when you're doing these surveys. Before we get started, we're going to do a brief introduction. So, like I said, my name is John. I'm the founder of a company called The Drone Life. We primarily do a lot of different construction mapping and progress reports up in New Jersey. And I'm joined here with my co-host.
Hey, this is Daniel Wyndham. I'm a drone pilot and I work in civil and environmental engineering and surveying. I've been doing drones for 5 years and I've worked on a variety of different projects with all kinds of different drones. So I'm excited to be here today.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for coming on. So we're gonna hop right in. So, what is drone land surveying? So, can you give everyone kind of like a brief introduction if they're not really familiar?
Sure, yeah. So, everybody's familiar with, using a drone to take cool pictures of your house or a sunset or take it out on the lake. But what's really awesome about drones and other technologies like that is it's able to make our jobs easier. So in land surveying, we've got a lot of different tools, and the drone is just another one of those tools that helps us do work, accurately and help us do it faster and more efficient than we traditionally would do. Inland surveying, just kind of give people a general idea of like what drones we might use. So like I use like a Phantom 4 Pro most of the time to do photogrammetry. And then we might also use, say I have a DJI M300 with a LiDAR unit on there where we might be doing LiDAR to most of the time create land surveys for topographic surveys. So generating, 1 foot contours to help engineers, whether they be at the company I work for, or, if we're doing that for another company, to help them design something, whether it be a solar farm or hospital or a neighborhood. Kind of just helps us do the same job that we would traditionally do, but do it in a more efficient way.
Yeah. So when you're using the drone for this, how much time savings or how much more efficiently can you do the survey?
It's very very evident in especially two different kinds of surveys. So there's Alta surveys, which is usually on like commercial real estate or anything involving a lot of money. So that would be a regular boundary survey, and then got additional work on top of it that the registered land surveyors and drafters and field crew and project managers like me who spend a little extra time that help you understand. Okay, I'm going to spend say $60 million on this property. I want to know if there's anything that's going to cause me to not be able to make my money back. So that kind of survey usually has a lot of documentation as far as hardscapes, so curbs and parking lots and buildings and things like that. And there are certain parts of those surveys that you can't actually use the drone for. So you have to know, okay, I've got to use this instrument here, maybe GPS here, and I can use the drone for this. And one big example is like a parking lot. And so if I'm doing an Alta survey of a commercial shopping center, like we did at the end of last year, that might have 300 parking spaces. And so what's the best way for us to show that accurately on a survey? And you can do that a few different ways. It's not like you have to go and actually survey every single parking spot, even if you were doing it conventionally, but it still takes a long time. Just to do something mundane like, okay, there's 14 in this row, there's 14 in that row, you can count or whatever. But with a drone, I can go out there, pre-program everything in the office, and then I can go out there and fly. And then instead of it taking, 2 or 3 days to collect all the different data, I've got a shortened list of what the field crew needs to collect and what we're going to collect in the office with the drone data. And it might reduce that by, say, 30% or 50%. And then on things like using LiDAR, that's where the time savings really evident. And it's almost to the point where there's no traditional alternative because people just don't do it anymore on larger sites.
Hmm.
So most sites 50 acres and above are not really field run topo. So that means a 2-man crew, basically almost always in the woods, just going every 25 foot or on the top of a stream or something like that, to get topo shots, and then that surface is created in Civil 3D later. But with the drone, I can, 50 acres is almost a joke. I mean, it's really small. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of office work, but actual field time is a lot shorter. I might spend 20 or 30 hours on the back end creating a really nice survey grade surface, incorporating field shots. But in the field, I might be there for like an hour or two. So,
Hmm.
it reduces your field time. It does increase your office time sometimes, but when you start seeing that scale, so if I'm doing a 500-acre site, I can do all the field work in one day, and then I can do, the office work over the next week. I mean, there's just not, it's either going to be a drone or an airplane at that point. Like nobody's going to be able to do that. So drones also help us be able to accomplish tasks internally that we might not be able to do because we don't have. I've never worked anywhere that had, manned lidar, and that's something that not a lot of people have. It's extremely expensive, millions of dollars of effort and training, and so that's something that is a competitive edge for, medium to small firms that they don't have to make that huge investment.
Yeah, and you said it like 50 acres. So if you are flying the drone at that site, you said
Hmm.
maybe take like an hour or two. So
Yeah,
is the drone going to be flying by itself like autonomously, or are you going to be there
yeah.
with the controller like manipulate like moving everything yourself?
So if you're doing photogrammetry, it's almost 100% autonomous. Now I've already, all that being said, I've spent 5 years figuring out how to make sure I've got the right flight path and I'm going to be at the right altitude. So that's a little bit, extra that you need to think about. But it's pretty much you take it out. You've already done all the stuff in the office. So when you get to the field, and this is also helpful because I do a lot of stuff to where I will do, multiple jobs in one day. So it's not just like a today we're doing this and tomorrow we're doing that. It's like, just this week. Um, one day I did 5 sites, another day I did 4 sites, and then another day I did 6 sites. So, I've done a lot of field work already this week. So now I've got a backlog of, okay, I'm coming back into the office, or if I got other
Hmm.
people in the office working on it simultaneously. So we're able to generate a lot of work. But, it's really helpful in everything that we do. And so if you're flying LiDAR, the only manual thing you really need to do is a calibration for the drone. So you have to get it out. You have to take off at a certain, basically you got to book it straight up to your altitude. You've got to fly really fast in a straight line. You got to do some figure eights, and then you just hit start. And then it does a similar type photogrammetry type pattern. It's just even less overlap. And like I did one yesterday, I'm getting a video ready to post on LinkedIn. I did the photogrammetry drone, the Phantom 4, and then I did the M300 with lidar on there just to see, to make sure that I'm giving my client, the highest level of data that I can do because I want to. A lot of us use Phantom 4 Pros in the open for topographic surveys. And they do a really good job. It's just you have to work in things like Virtual Surveyor or CAD to really get that surface
Hmm.
really nice. And then on the flip side, the LiDAR will just basically, that point cloud is going to have every single point on there, and you can use other software to kind of reduce that level. It's just more expensive. So it's just an internal idea of, okay, what's the best way to service my clients going forward? Um, and, be able to leverage tools in a way that is cost effective, but still, effective to pay off things like lidar. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And speaking of lidar, so that camera definitely isn't just like a point and shoot camera. You know,
right.
can you explain like some of like the huge amount of settings and everything that like really goes into that?
Yeah, yeah. Actually, I kept it right here. Hold on a second. So this is my lidar. It's a Rock Robotic R2A. It's a this DJI's company. I can't remember the name of it, but DJI's LiveVox Avia sensor right here is on it. And then you've got a really nice IMU to help get all that data working. It's kind of like this is where all the magic happens. And it does have a regular point and shoot camera right here for colorization, but this is where I really need everything. So um, it's able to generate 240,000 pulses a second. And then what you see in your point cloud is, and this is true of any LiDAR, it just varies from type to type and mission to mission. But basically, the LiDAR has, a little bit of fuzz in it. So the laser hits at a different angle every time. It's in a different position in the sky. And so you end up with a really, really dense point cloud with a little bit of, it's literally about that big, maybe 2 or 3 inches. and then you use software and a little bit of, you know, knowledge on each one of different types of projects, and you also have a lot of ground control because I mean there's field work to all this too. But
Hmm.
you know the drone is able to lessen it. That one's about a 75-acre site, and I was on site for I think 45 minutes. And obviously, yeah. And so there's other ways you could do it. You know, there's people who take a GPS unit and strap it to the top of their truck and just drive around, and that's semi-effective. But I can tell you, for example, on this day, you know, we've had a lot of rain in the southeast. We wouldn't have been able to do that any other way than with a drone. And so I'm trying to keep things on a schedule so our clients can, you know their earthwork numbers, whether they're a contractor or just even the developer that wants to know how are things going. You know, everybody's got the Gantt chart of their project on the wall, and it's a way to understand in real terms with actionable data. Okay, like I know we have moved this many cubic yards of dirt in the last month, give or take 1 or 2%, versus a conversation with somebody on the phone that may always just tell you that everything's going great. you know it's just a good way to know what's going on. And then when we're doing it for site design, if it's a raw land site, it's even there's lots of places where even an entire state, or an entire county, like the county I live in, doesn't have anything, but it might, I think in probably more states than not in the United States, you can get LiDAR data at a higher level, with a lower level of accuracy. It's still generally accurate, but when you're going to develop a site, you want to make sure that, all of your money's lined up the way you want it to be. So when you go to do engineering on a site and, you use GIS to, topo, and you might have 2-foot contours. We worked on a site, I think this was like 3 weeks ago, and the developer, which was not our client, it was just somebody that had permitted it a long time ago, and somebody came along and bought it. And so they're going to build a residential subdivision, and they're going to go build a stormwater pond, which is extremely important. It's where all the water is going, where you're putting these houses, and you're trying to keep people's houses from not flooding and things like that. And so whoever designed it, which was not, anybody I'm affiliated with, they used the data that they were hired to use, right? It was wrong by 8 feet. And so 8 inches in surveying is like embarrassing. So 8 feet is just like, I thought someone told me wrong. And so they went to go build this pond, and it was like, this is not what this looks like. And so you end up having to rework it. In that situation, I can guarantee you, just in the amount of time lost, they were losing enough money to remake. The people that were out there were having to deal with somebody else's mistake. But if it was done right to begin with, generally on the LiDAR topo, I'm within probably 2 inches across the site at any given point. A lot of it's basically zero. But in mapping level topo, just in the United States, if you're doing a 2-foot contour map, which is pretty prevalent in most areas, and low-lying coastal areas might be 1 foot. If you're doing a 2-foot map, that means that 90% of your contours need to be accurate within 1 foot. So it's actually still a lot of play in there. But when you start getting into areas where, hey, my survey says, this is 8 foot wrong, then you're gonna have real problems. And so it's really important. A lot of people like to look at their budgets and say, hey, I can delete this line item from my budget early on when I'm doing surveying, and I encourage you not to, because the worst that can happen, the worst thing that can happen is way worse than you could possibly guess in some cases.
Yeah. Yeah, so we talked a lot about LiDAR, but there's some other types of mapping data that the drone does do that's really beneficial. One of them being orthomosaic maps, which is basically the drone is going to be flying, again, like kind of an autonomous flight path that you set up, and it's going to be taking usually hundreds or thousands of photos, and like one after another, and then what you do later is you take all these photos, and they take them pretty much straight down, looking straight down the ground, and then the software actually kind of merge them all together and it's kind of like one big photo, like one huge map. Right. So it's kind of like if you went on Google Earth and looking at a site or something, and it's just all there. That's basically what the drone does, but it's going to be much more detailed
Hmm.
and also up to date because usually those photos are kind of old.
Right.
So
Yeah, and the fun thing is you can export your map into Google Earth and just stack it right on top of it. So that way you don't
that's
have to
true.
change. You have to change your workflows. Yeah, and I can tell you, having a civil, engineering background and environmental science background, every project that I've ever worked on, by its very nature, changes almost every single day. So I mean, you might work on a job for 2 years, and it might never show up in Google Earth. And if it does, it's just going to show up one time. It's not like it's not going to be anything that you want to see. So, I know it's something you're familiar with, but I might get hired to do construction monitoring for mapping,
Hmm.
every week, because when you're working on a really well-run site, it's going to change significantly every week if
Yeah.
there's not a lot of rain. I mean, you can go from it basically looking like dirt to being, you can recognize, hey, this is an apartment complex. Like, I know where the
Hmm.
buildings are. Like, there's 4 buildings here now. The pads are in. We're starting to get utilities in. So especially when you've got kind of well, it's just not everybody's in the office every day, and I don't know that that's ever going to change. And not only that, travel's always impacted. I mean, you may want to get to all your sites, but if you've got sites across the United States, I've
Hmm.
worked in jobs before where I had projects in 40 different states and multiple countries. I mean, I used to work on a site in Guam. Like I never went there. I'd like to. But like I was preparing GIS maps for it all the time, and the only way in all of these projects to get a decent amount of actionable data to me is using drones. I mean, there's services with manned aircraft, there's services with satellite imagery that I think are perfectly adequate for a lot of different uses. But if you're doing, especially if you're moving dirt, if you're building things, if you're doing things, making things, you want to see it in detail. And I can tell you that when we're doing those orthomosaic maps, I'm going to fly it with the intention of knowing what my deliverable is. And so I
Hmm.
always, when I'm trying to figure out how to do mission planning, when I'm trying to figure out how to even write a proposal, my question is not like, which drone do you want me to use, or what are you really excited about? It's like, what are you actually going to do? Like, what do you want from me? Do you want a full GIS model of every site you have built in ArcGIS Online with all the orthos and lots of shape files and blah, 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 blah? Or like, do you just want a PDF and see what it looks like so you don't have to go there? And
Yeah.
90% of the time it's the PDF. But if that's what you need to make your business better, that's easier for me, it's easier for you, and it's more cost effective for both of us.
Hmm.
And I love the ortho. That's the first thing I started out doing. So when Part 107 passed, I started flying the day after that or something. There was a commercial airline pilot at the firm I worked at the time, so I was flying under him because I hadn't got to take my test yet. But I mean, we were flying 2 days after it passed because it rained. Otherwise we'd been out there the next day, and we were flying 5 or 6 sites. For big meetings for Fortune 500 companies, and it's just helping people who make decisions that honestly their time, it's not worth it for them to get in a car or get in a plane and go to like 7 different states and just go look at something. It's not really that much more advantageous from just a site inspection standpoint, especially in construction,
Hmm.
because there's nobody there that works for you. They might be your subcontractor. If you want to, if you're the vice president of Walmart and you want to go visit your store manager, I understand that. If you're the vice president of Walmart and you want to know how many cracks are in your pavement in your parking lot, you can hire a drone pilot. You know what I mean? Like, you can go home and eat dinner with your family. You don't need to do that. And that, especially in these kind of times where travel, I mean, even if you want to travel right now, it's kind of hard, and I don't know how long that's going to last. And, especially with ortho mapping, it's to the point where you can have a good distributed workforce to where, I can sit here near Atlanta and manage projects anywhere. And it doesn't really matter
Hmm.
because the on the ortho side of it, on the photogrammetry side of it, the hard work is in the office. I mean, it's almost 100% autonomous in the field. And so, I'm going to know, aside from, all of a sudden a cell phone tower popping up that's not on the Google Earth photo, that's a year old or whatever, there's not a lot that can really change. And so, like, I did an Alta survey ortho photo yesterday in downtown Atlanta. I mean, almost right near where the Atlanta Braves stadium used to be. Now it's a college stadium, but I went to Braves games there when I was a kid. And so it was an incredibly dense site. And so I can tell you that the reason that the drones paid off so much, and especially with the mapping, like you're talking about, like I took a video too, I took some pictures, but I'm going to be able to take that map and then actually do real work with it. I'm going to be able to take that in combination with some survey field work and put it in Civil 3D, which is us, but it could be GIS, it could be any kind of spatial software. I mean, you could even do it in Photoshop if you're a landscape architect or whatever, put it in Illustrator. It's to scale. It has good coordinates with it, and when the field survey points come in, sometimes they're confusing. This is just a product of urban infill, but it went from, I think the lot had one house on it, some from 1910 or something like that, and now it's about to have, I think, 15 townhomes. So you can imagine like the size of one house and a little bit of road. It's less than an acre. That it goes from there to 15 houses, so every bit of the utilities is just mixed in. There's walls here, walls there, all kinds of stormwater stuff. It just doesn't make sense unless you see it. And so the field people are going to see that, but the office people aren't. The drone's able to bridge that gap and say, okay, well, I know what you're talking about now because I got the whole picture. And it's also, I deliver a 3D mesh too. I mean, if we want to measure, how tall the walls are, we can do that. And it's, maybe not going to be, in certain situations you don't want to use that, but it's definitely going to be kind of a sanity check of, hey, this wall's 8 feet tall. Did he mean 8 inches tall? Because, that might have been, yeah. But so, and that's actually on that project, I went out there and I'm like, man, that wall is extremely tall because it's usually like a little, just to keep water from flowing. And it's 8 feet tall. So if I was drafting that in the office, or if I'm working in the survey department, any place in America, I'm kind of going, I don't know that he really meant that, and that's just going to slow me down. It's not going to ruin everything, but it's just bridging that gap of between office and field, and between, say, boardroom and static assets or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and one project that we actually have been doing recently, pretty much like New Jersey is the hotspot in the country right now for the most new construction warehouses.
Yeah.
And so we've been doing a lot of new construction warehouses being on site, and some of the orthomosaic maps that we've been doing, they actually take them and then overlay them onto like the site drawings.
Yeah, that's what I do.
And so you can, so they can basically like get a really good understanding of,
right,
everything's matching up, if everything was placed in the right areas, if there's any like mishaps, like something was not supposed to be there.
Right.
So.
Right, and a lot of times that happens, and it's not bad for people to fix stuff in the field, but they don't always communicate that, right? And so the guy's out there, he's doing his job, he's trying to make sure deadlines are met and that things still work. But if they're moving stuff 6 feet over, and that works to them, but you're the project manager, and hey, down the road there's actually going to be supposed to be a bollard sitting right there, and it's going to stab right through my water line. Then that you're able to fix that now instead of when the other crew comes out 3 months from now and goes, hey, we got a problem. Then you got to tear everything up, rebuild it at some huge expense, and then figure out that back charge. And it's just a mess. And it's such a low cost and high return volume of money, because these projects are tens of millions of dollars. And I'm more than happy to get tens of millions of dollars for my drone maps, but I don't right now. And so it's almost a rounding error to do any of this stuff, and it's able to catch problems that you wouldn't really catch otherwise, unless you literally just had someone standing there all the time that knew exactly what they were talking about, the same as you are, because the expertise that people have isn't communicated even if you have additional staff. If you know everything about a project, but you're in the job trailer, having a meeting on Zoom with the 80 subcontractors, and you've got another guy helping you out in the field, that's not really going to help you that much, because they're just going to go, yeah, everything looked good today. Everybody installed it. Look, we fixed one problem that came up, no big deal, but you don't know that it is a big deal. And so when you get that every week or even every day, aerial map with your approved site plan, like you can literally just look at it for 15 seconds and anybody who knows what they're doing will go, hey, this isn't right. Like we need to make sure, like, why did this happen? And most of the time it does tend to be fine. But, I've ran into an issue with a construction project on, I think it was an apartment building, and the drone compared to the site plan, exactly like you're talking about, just solved all of the questions at once. What the people who did the parking lot put the handicap spots in the wrong spot. And so that seemed fine to them, but when you look at ADA, accommodations, it's really important to make sure that you put the handicap spot next to the handicap ramp and not one spot over. Which it seems pretty obvious. You should just do it how it's supposed to be, but so for some reason that didn't happen. And so the owner got a report back and said, hey, you're not ADA compliant on this building, blah blah blah. The site is not near, the handicap spot's not near the ramp. Well, why would it not be? Of course it is. It was designed to be like that. And then you take that drone map and you take that site map and you see the drone map, the logo's right here for the handicap spot, and you see the site map, it's right here. And you go, I know what happened. I know who did it. I know when they did it because I've got construction progress monitoring throughout. That job that actually came up in an Alta. So if we would have been doing construction monitoring, we could have caught it before. That would have been, but it's really beneficial because it just speaks for itself. Because the people that are your customers in that, or people that are interested in do that kind of work, they know what they're doing. And so you're just giving them a tool to help do their job better. And the drone itself is a job to help me do my job better, because I might, I used to do a lot of inspections at landfills, which is gross, by the way. And so I heard of these things called drones where I could fly a robot over the trash instead of me walking around and changing my boots every few weeks. And so I got really interested in that, and it worked really well. And it saved me a lot of time, and it allowed me to do the job that I already knew how to do, and I could do 3 sites in a day instead of 1. And, you can't beat that. You can't make more time. You can always make more money, and, you can hire more people, but you can't make more time in the day, and there's only so many people that know how to do that job. And, when you're into drones, you're kind of cheating a little bit. I feel like it's just making more time in the day for yourself.
Yeah. And, people who are, want to get into this technology or use it on their job sites, can we talk about some of the different qualifications? Because, you don't want to go out immediately and,
it seems easy until you do
it. Trying to go out and just buy the equipment, getting a whole LiDAR set up, maybe $100,000 potentially.
Yeah.
Around that. So
yeah, or more.
What really qualifications, people really need? Can they go out and just start doing it in a few weeks?
Yeah. So I learned a lot through messing up, because I started right when everything was brand new, and so there was just not a lot of resources. And I can tell you that it is not a good feeling to get back from another state and then go to process your data after having flown there in the morning and flown back in the afternoon, and you missed a spot, and then have to go explain, oh, well, that didn't show up on the tax assessor's website, so I'm sorry. Google Earth didn't show that, I'm sorry. And so there's a lot of procedures, and there's just a lot of institutional knowledge that is kind of hard to get. It's really easy to think that you can drive down to Best Buy or get your nephew a drone for Christmas and he can take care of that for you, until they hit something or someone, or they don't have a safety policy, or they don't have insurance, or they don't know how to format the memory card and they do the whole thing and then it doesn't work. There's a lot of stuff like that, but not to mention, especially for external programs, if you're doing it for somebody else, or even for yourself. So there's a lot of regulations around, what is surveying and, what is engineering. And so in each state, I'm more familiar with Georgia's, but for example, I did a lot of work in North Carolina, still do. North Carolina requires its own drone license. I'm not 100% sure that that's legal, but I have one anyway, just in case. No one's ever asked to see it. It's in my wallet somewhere. But that's just something that you might not know. But as far as surveying goes, it can be very specific. I mean, if you read the surveying
Hmm.
regulations in Georgia, for example, it would make you nervous to open Google Earth. It's kind of like a confuse. Yeah, I mean, it's literally like you can't measure anything unless you're a survey. I mean, it's just written so vaguely, and some of it's old. But if you're a drone service provider, or if you think you're a drone service provider, and you want to go out and help people on construction sites measure stockpiles, I mean, in most states, you have to be a surveyor.
Hmm.
There's a lot of stuff that you can't do, and people really aren't going to tell you that. And another thing is, it's really easy for data to look correct but be wrong. So
Yeah.
I can give you an example. If in surveying, if you are using your equipment, and so most people work in state plane coordinates. I don't want to get too in the weeds for everybody, but basically, the Earth is round, in case everybody didn't know. Um, and most engineering and surveying coordinates are in a state plane. A plane is flat. So how do you translate a round globe, which is you'd be surprised, into a flat plane? And so you basically load this file in your equipment, and where I am, it's about like 94 feet different if you have it on versus when it's off. And you don't want to be wrong because you look like an idiot if you're off by like 100 feet. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
it's one thing, like I said, 100 millimeters would be a lot. 100 feet, good grief. And it's funny because I was actually at a construction that site I mapped yesterday in downtown Atlanta, and they had painted all their survey benchmarks across the site. It was adjacent site. There's a lot of construction going on. So not the one we're working on, but the one right next door. So I'm standing in this parking lot, and it says elevation 929 feet. And I was like, okay, I mean, it doesn't sound exactly right. And so I got my GPS equipment out from my Explorer, and I sat it up there, and it said 1,000 and 17 feet or something like that. I'm like, oh, well, these people doing this work next door, everything on their site's wrong. So even if you're a surveyor, you can mess up. You know what I mean? And so if you have no idea what I'm talking about, then you got to be real careful when you go out and start offering, especially like mapping products. Because I mean, I've done this, almost every day for 5 years, and it's it's easy to look at a site and look. You might get great contours from your lidar, and then I was helping another surveyor out actually with his lidar, and he said everything looks great except for my accuracy report. I think it's wrong. And I'm like, he's like, I don't know if I can turn this in my client. I think it's a little off. And it was 28 feet different. And what had happened was he just adjusted his point cloud to be with that geoid, and there was another one of those kind of like meters to feet issues. And so he had adjusted the whole thing. He used a super complicated, system, and then had some pretty easy cloud software. He just didn't hit the save button. And that was his problem. But if he would not have come and asked me, he could have delivered that, and then that whole project would look like it was incorrect. Visually, it looks beautiful. I mean, the
Hmm.
contours were great, everything was wonderful, but the numbers were wrong, and people care about the numbers.
Yeah, that's true. And it's a lot of it just like trial and error.
Yeah,
Just
a
like you
lot.
said that you've been doing it for five years,
Yeah,
and to be honest, like you can look up some stuff on YouTube. You can look up some stuff wherever you want, like
it's not the
articles.
same.
But
Yeah,
there's nothing that beats just trial and error because usually
yeah,
the people who like are doing that stuff, are not out there like almost every day doing
yeah,
flying and practicing and processing softwares and trying to like
yeah,
do different flight settings and like you were saying, like just like one setting that's
yeah.
wrong out of like all the settings will throw off everything, and sometimes you might
Mhm.
not even know.
Yeah,
And
and then you might be using multiple settings on one job. Like if you're trying to generate a 3D mesh with photogrammetry software, well, you're going to fly at the top down. The nadir image is the 90 degrees straight down, looking at the ground. But you're also going to do angled. You might do a 65 degree or a 45 degree.
mhm.
Just something cutting the sky out, and you have to just do those because like this job's not like that job, and it's just a matter of understanding. Like you almost kind of get a feel for it, which is not very scientific of me. I feel like I should have it in a manual somewhere, but you can't really do that. You just kind of have to try it. And it's also a matter of staying up with the industry. I mean, um, software providers, especially if you use cloud software providers, they can change their algorithms. I can tell you, like, I use Drone Deploy a lot, And when I was doing environmental science projects in South Georgia doing wetland banks, they're mostly trees, and trees don't stitch that well in photogrammetry. So I was
Mm-hmm.
having to fly at like an incredibly high overlap. So basically taking twice as long as if I was flying a hayfield or a parking lot. And if I would not have been continually reading about everything that I do, so I noticed that, hey, we updated our thing to do blah, 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 blah. And it didn't really say it outright, but I was like, that sounds like they can handle trees better. So then the next time I went out there and I flew it at normal parameters and it looked fine. So, I mean, if I would have missed that, I could have gone a year going and doing, 500 acres a day instead of 1,200 acres a day. I mean, it's that different. And so,
Yeah.
it's not just like, hey, I learned how to click the right buttons in order. It's like, I need to understand like what is going on and like how it changes. I mean, you think about the industry, like when I got out of college, like you couldn't even do the job I have. Like it didn't exist, like, I mean, I went to college for political science, so it didn't matter anyway. But, it's just like there are companies that are new right now that we don't even talk about that might affect our everyday in our industry in like 6 months. Like it's literally
Mm-hmm.
like that. I mean, you think about how DJI is only, I think the Phantom series is maybe 1 year older than my son, and he's 7. Like like it's just crazy to think about how things can change. But you just kind of have to be on it all the time. I mean, it's hard to say that. It's like I'd love to say like, oh, just subscribe to this website or watch these YouTube videos, but like no, you need
Mm-hmm.
to subscribe to like 8. And like you need to know who these people are. You need to know who John is and subscribe to his newsletter and read like 6 other ones, and then watch all my LinkedIn videos. Like that's, and then you're still like underprepared, and that's still just one slice of it. That's just the drone side of it. But anyway, it's super interesting work. I love most of the time the fact that almost every time I fly, somebody's going to come stand next to you, and sometimes you got to say, look, if you're stick flying a construction site, you got to be like, I can't talk to you right now. And I
Yeah.
actually, maybe you have one of these, but they sell. My funny story is they sell a vest on Amazon that says FAA drone pilot, do not disturb or don't bother, something like that. And so I was like, you know what, I'm going to get one of these because every single time somebody talks to me. And so I bought one, and the first time I wore it was in Mobile, Alabama, the great city of Mobile. And I mean, I really like the place. I'm dissing it. It's a great place, but I was at a not great place to be flying a drone at, doing some, I think it was a landfill or something like that. And the first thing I heard when I got out of my Explorer, I put the vest on, I went to get the Phantom out of the back, was FAA pilot, man, what's up? And the guy walked up to me because of the vest I just bought to keep people away from me. But I talked to a guy, I think it was yesterday, the day before, it was when I was in Atlanta, um, that, he was working, he was doing a food delivery for the restaurant that was across the street. It was early in the morning, so everybody's kind of getting their deliveries. He just walked up to me in the parking lot and was like, hey, man, what do you do for your job? Like, I'm trying to figure out what I want to do in my life, and you're out here flying a drone on a Tuesday morning. Like, what are you doing? And so, I talked to him about a little bit about surveying and drones and Part 107 and stuff. It's a really interesting job to have. It just takes a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
I told him, I was like, look, it's not something that you just like decide I'm going to do. It's like, okay, well, you really got to understand what it's going to be. And it's not even a thing unto itself. Like I got into drones not because of drones, because I was an environmental scientist and I needed
Mm-hmm.
something to help my job do better. I think, in integrating drones in your vertical that you already have that works is just going to make your life easier. And if you're able to, to be a drone service provider all the time, that's awesome. But it's
Mm-hmm.
just going to fit in different verticals, different ways. It's
Yeah,
hard to
that,
do.
that's
When people say, "How do I start my drone program?" Just call me or someone else. Like that's my advice. Like I've already done this. Like you've already done this. You know what it feels like. I can't like recommend that you go through the same thing I went through.
yeah, it's just so much time and just experience, just accumulating all this knowledge. It's just a lot, and
Yeah,
flying the drone, really getting the licenses is so
yeah,
much that goes into this stuff that people don't understand. But I think
yeah,
that's a great way to end it. But
yeah.
if anyone out there is a surveyor or they work in construction, environmental scientist, whatever it may be, and you're looking to use drones, and maybe you want to take the route of, hiring some professionals, you can always look in the show notes below or the description and take a look at our website link. And I'll also put an article in there that covers a little bit more about drones and surveying that we have written up, which you can get some more information if you're interested. But anyways, appreciate you guys watching the video or listening on the podcast. Thanks, Daniel, for coming on and
no problem.
sharing all your knowledge.
Yeah.
And always reach out to us if you have any questions. We're always happy to help. You can reach us both on LinkedIn. We're really active on LinkedIn, sharing a lot of drone stuff and videos. So thanks for watching, and I'll catch you again next time.